And now to a mystery man that might have gotten just a little bit more mysterious. Who was D.B. Cooper? Well, these are the FBI sketches of the man behind one of the most notorious high-flying hijack heists in history.
For decades, the D.B. Cooper case has haunted investigators, baffled the FBI, and inspired countless theories. A man hijacks a plane, demands ransom, vanishes into the night, and is never seen again. But now, everything may have changed. Using advanced AI analysis on evidence long believed exhausted, researchers uncovered a detail no human had ever connected before. What the system detected wasn't just surprising, it was deeply unsettling. So, could modern technology have finally exposed the truth behind America's most infamous unsolved disappearance, or revealed something even more mysterious? Artificial intelligence reopens D.B. Cooper mystery. For more than 50 years, the mystery of D.B. Cooper has fascinated investigators, historians, and ordinary people alike. Countless theories have surfaced over the decades, but now the case has entered a completely different era. Dr. Hal Rowan has taken the legendary unsolved hijacking and placed it under the cold, relentless eye of advanced artificial intelligence, turning one of America's greatest mysteries into a massive digital investigation driven not by emotion or speculation, but by logic, evidence, and calculated probability. Instead of chasing dramatic stories or popular opinions, Rowan's system follows one strict rule: no suspect, clue, or theory can be considered believable unless it crosses a demanding 51% credibility threshold. Every possibility is tested, measured, and challenged. The AI does not care about rumors, famous names, or sensational headlines. It only follows the evidence wherever it leads. The investigation unfolds like a carefully constructed puzzle. The artificial intelligence breaks the case into separate analytical sections, each focused on a major part of the hijacking. Eyewitness accounts are examined with astonishing detail. The system studies facial descriptions, estimated height and weight, speech patterns, clothing details, and even behavioral habits noticed by passengers and crew members during the flight. Tiny details that human investigators may have overlooked decades ago are re-examined through a modern technological lens. The daring parachute escape becomes another major focus. Using aviation records, weather reports, terrain analysis, and survival calculations, the AI reconstructs the exact conditions of the night Cooper disappeared into darkness. Wind speeds, landing possibilities, forest density, and parachute performance are all processed together to determine what may truly have happened after the jump. Even the ransom money becomes part of the digital investigation. The AI tracks timelines, movement possibilities, and discovery patterns connected to the cash found years later, searching for explanations that earlier investigators could never fully test. Old forensic evidence, including fibers, cigarettes, travel behavior, and suspect backgrounds, is also reanalyzed with far greater processing power than investigators once had available. As the layers of evidence build, long-trusted theories begin to collapse while forgotten possibilities suddenly appear far more convincing. Then comes the most shocking moment of all. After processing decades of evidence through its probability engine, the AI delivers a calculated conclusion. One suspect rises clearly above the rest, identified not with certainty, but with a striking 68% probability. Bringing the legend of D.B. Cooper comes back to life in a way the world has never seen before. But who is D.B. Cooper? What is he known for? Let's journey into the details of the man who walked into history like an ordinary passenger, the hijacker who vanished forever. On Thanksgiving Eve, 1971, a calm, ordinary-looking man in a dark suit boarded Northwest Orient Flight 305 from Portland to Seattle amid a crowded airport. Nothing about him stood out, and the short routine flight seemed completely uneventful before what would later become a famous mystery. When asked for his name, he calmly introduced himself as Dan Cooper. No one questioned him. No security officer looked twice. In those days, airport security was far more relaxed, and passengers moved through terminals with little suspicion. To everyone around him, Cooper was simply another traveler trying to catch a flight before Thanksgiving. But hidden beneath that calm exterior was a shocking secret. Shortly after the plane took off, the mysterious passenger handed a note to a flight attendant. At first, she barely paid attention, assuming it was the phone number of a lonely businessman. But when she finally opened the note, everything changed. The man quietly informed her that he had a bomb in his briefcase. In an instant, the peaceful holiday flight turned into a nightmare. What followed would become one of the strangest and most fascinating crimes in American history. The mysterious hijacker demanded a large ransom, parachutes, and complete cooperation from the crew. Yet despite the terrifying situation, he remained strangely calm and polite throughout the ordeal, speaking with a confidence that unsettled everyone around him. Then came the moment that transformed him into a legend. After collecting the ransom money, Dan Cooper disappeared into the dark, stormy night by parachuting from the plane somewhere over the Pacific Northwest. No body was ever found. No clear trace of him ever appeared again. And from that night forward, the man known to the world as D.B. Cooper became one of America's greatest unsolved mysteries. How did D.B. Cooper get hold of the aircraft? What was his composure during the process? Let's delve into the details of the simple flight that turned into a national emergency, the Calm Sky hijacking. Midway through a routine short flight, a calm passenger quietly handed a flight attendant a note, which she initially treated as harmless. Moments later, he leaned in and warned her to read it immediately, revealing a shocking threat. He had a bomb. The message inside confirmed his demands were real. He requested $200,000 in cash, 4 parachutes, and a refueled aircraft waiting in Seattle. He warned that if authorities failed to comply exactly, he would destroy the plane, putting all passengers and crew in immediate danger during what had begun as an ordinary journey. To remove any doubt, he slowly opened his briefcase, just enough for her to see what looked like explosives tightly wired together inside. It was enough to confirm the danger without needing further explanation. What made the moment even more disturbing was how calm he remained. There was no shouting, no nervous movement, no signs of panic. He sat as though he was simply making a normal request, as if the entire situation was under his complete control. The flight attendant, trained for emergencies but never hoping to face one like this, moved carefully and discreetly informed the cockpit crew. Inside the cockpit, the pilot immediately contacted air traffic control. Within minutes, normal flight operations turned into a full-scale federal emergency response. The FBI was alerted. Security protocols activated. Emergency teams prepared on the ground. A simple regional flight that had started like any other was suddenly transformed into a fast-moving national hijacking crisis unfolding thousands of feet above the earth. Yet one detail disturbed everyone involved. The man showed no fear at all. Not once. How was Cooper's execution plans? Did he face any hindrance? Let's dive into the details of the calmest hijacking in history. Calm execution in the night sky. When the plane touched down in Seattle, a strange kind of silence took over everything. Outside the aircraft, law enforcement officers and airport staff moved carefully, following every instruction that had been passed along from the mysterious man known only as Cooper. There was no confusion, no panic, and no open confrontation. Instead, there was an almost unsettling order to everything that was happening. Inside the plane, the passengers had no idea what was really going on. One by one, they were calmly guided off the aircraft. They were told nothing about the situation. No one explained that a man on board had just forced the entire aviation system into a carefully controlled operation. To them, it felt like a delayed flight, nothing more. But in reality, they had unknowingly shared space with someone who had completely changed the course of events in the sky. On the runway, fuel trucks arrived and quietly refueled the plane. The ransom money, prepared exactly as demanded in small, unmarked bills, was delivered without delay. 4 parachutes were also brought onto the aircraft, just as Cooper had requested. Every condition he had set was met without resistance. It was as if the system itself had surrendered to his instructions. Then came an even more unexpected decision. Cooper agreed to release most of the passengers safely. Only a few essential crew members were required to stay on board. There was no struggle, no argument, and no breakdown in communication. Everything unfolded with a strange sense of calm obedience, as though everyone involved was following a rehearsed script. Once the aircraft was refueled and prepared, it lifted off again into the dark sky of the night. This time, Cooper claimed the destination was Mexico. The plane climbed steadily, disappearing into the vast darkness above the Pacific Northwest. Inside the cabin, Cooper remained composed and focused. He adjusted instructions when needed, carefully monitored the aircraft's speed, and observed the landscape far below as it faded into shadow. There was no sign of fear or panic in his behavior. He did not act like someone running blindly from the law or acting on impulse. Instead, he moved with control, patience, and precision. Every action he took suggested preparation and intention. It was as if he were not escaping at all, but simply carrying out a carefully thought-out plan that had been set long before the plane ever left the ground. When and how did Cooper leave the aircraft? Where was his destination? Let's dig into the details of the leap into the storm and the vanishing act. The night Cooper disappeared forever. The weather over Washington state had turned rough and unforgiving. A thick storm rolled across the sky, covering everything in dark, heavy clouds. Rain fell hard against the aircraft, drumming against its metal body like thousands of small stones being thrown at once. Strong winds pushed and pulled at the plane as it moved forward, making its journey feel even more uncertain. Far below, the ground was no longer visible. The land had disappeared completely under a blanket of cloud and rain. Inside the aircraft, things were very different, but still tense. The passengers and crew were quiet, each person aware that something unusual was happening, though no one could fully relax. In the middle of it all, Cooper remained unusually calm. He sat in his seat with steady focus, showing no panic, no fear, and no hesitation. It was as if he had already imagined every step of what was about to happen long before he ever stepped onto the plane. Then the final moment came. An instruction was given, and the rear staircase of the Boeing 727 was slowly lowered. A loud rush of cold night air filled the cabin, breaking the warmth inside and replacing it with the sharp bite of the storm outside. The sound of the wind grew stronger, almost roaring, as if the sky itself was calling. At around 8 p.m., somewhere above the deep, dark forests near the Columbia River region, Cooper made his move. Without any dramatic pause, he stepped toward the open exit. The storm waited for no one. He jumped into it. In that instant, a parachute, a bag filled with cash, and a single human figure disappeared into the violent night sky. The darkness swallowed him almost immediately, as rain and cloud hid everything from view. There was no scream, no signal, no visible landing, only the storm continuing as if nothing had happened at all. The aircraft continued its flight and eventually landed in Reno. It touched down safely, but something important was missing. There were no recovered items tied to Cooper, no confirmed landing spot, no witnesses on the ground who could say they saw him arrive. No trace of him was ever found in that moment. It was as if the sky had opened for him and then closed again, keeping every secret locked away in the storm. Where did he go after his departure? Was he located thereafter? Let's take a look at the nation that searched for a ghost. The vanishing of D.B. Cooper. The FBI quickly launched one of the biggest manhunts ever carried out in the history of aviation. It was a massive, urgent response to a man who had vanished mid-air with money and a parachute. Helicopters flew low and slow over thick forests, cutting through misty skies as they scanned every inch of land below. On the ground, teams of agents and soldiers spread out in all directions. They searched along riverbanks, pushed through dense bushes, and moved carefully through muddy terrain where a single footprint could mean everything. Trained bloodhounds were brought in to pick up any possible scent, tracking through wet soil and fallen pine needles. Every likely landing spot was checked, and every possible escape route was examined with extreme care. Yet, despite all this effort, the forest stayed silent. It revealed nothing. There was no sign of a parachute tangled in the trees, no broken branches that clearly pointed to a landing, no footprints that could be confidently linked to a man walking away. No pieces of equipment, no money bags, and no clear disturbance in the ground that would explain how someone could land safely and disappear. It was as if the forest had swallowed him whole without leaving any trace behind. The more they searched, the more confusing it became. It felt like D.B. Cooper had simply melted into the landscape itself, leaving behind only questions. Then, something small but powerful happened. An error that would change the story forever. A misunderstanding of the name he used during the hijacking led reporters to record Dan Cooper as D.B. Cooper. It seemed like a simple mistake, but it stuck. News outlets repeated it, the public absorbed it, and over time, the wrong name became the only name anyone remembered. From that moment, a legend was born not just from a daring crime, but from a clerical error that reshaped history. He was no longer seen as just a bold hijacker who vanished from a plane. He became something larger in the public imagination, a mystery without an ending, a man who slipped through every net, and a lasting symbol of disappearance itself. Was any trace found of D.B. Cooper, or the things he collected? When were the discoveries made? Let's talk about the clues under the water, and the mystery that refused to die. The unsolved money trail mystery. For many years, investigators followed one lead after another, hoping that each new clue would finally reveal the truth. More than 1,000 people were questioned and examined as possible suspects. The case attracted attention from all kinds of individuals, some who truly believed they had useful information, and many others who simply wanted attention or fame. Each confession or claim was carefully checked, but time after time, they fell apart under close investigation. Nothing solid ever emerged. Then, almost 10 years after the incident, something completely unexpected happened, something that would shake the case awake again. A young boy, while camping near the Columbia River, made a strange discovery in the sand. Buried beneath the surface were several bundles of old $20 bills. They were damaged, faded, and partly rotten from years of exposure to water and soil. At first glance, they looked like useless pieces of trash, but when handled carefully, it became clear that they were still identifiable. When investigators were called in and the serial numbers were checked, the discovery became even more shocking. The numbers matched the ransom money from Flight 305. This was not random cash. It was real, confirmed evidence tied directly to the mysterious hijacking. But instead of solving the case, this discovery only made it more complicated. How did the money get there? Was it dropped during a failed escape? Did the hijacker survive the jump and later lose the cash? Or was it deliberately hidden, meant to be found years later? Another possibility was even darker. Had nature itself carried the money downstream after a fatal accident, scattering clues that would never form a complete story? The FBI reopened parts of the investigation, carefully studying river paths, weather patterns, and terrain maps. Teams searched along riverbanks, hoping to find more evidence that might explain the discovery. But despite all efforts, nothing else turned up. No parachute was found. No body was ever recovered. No clear sign confirmed whether he lived or died. Only small fragments of possibility remained, scattered across time like broken pieces of a puzzle with missing parts. In the end, after 45 years of mystery, the official case was closed. But in truth, for investigators, historians, and the public, it never truly came to an end. The questions still linger, waiting for answers that may never come. Was any independent investigation conducted after the FBI closed the case? Why was the case revisited? Let's find out. The pilot who reopened it. Long after the FBI officially slowed down and moved away from the case, the mystery did not truly fade. It simply changed hands. A new wave of investigation began, not from police officers or government agents, but from private researchers who were driven by curiosity and a refusal to accept easy answers. Among them was a retired airline pilot who became one of the most dedicated voices in the search for truth. He was not interested in theories based on rumors or dramatic storytelling. Instead, he looked at the case the way he had spent his entire career looking at the sky, with precision, logic, and experience. He had flown thousands of hours in commercial aircraft. He understood how planes behave under pressure, how wind changes movement, and how small mistakes in altitude or speed can become life-threatening. To him, the mystery was not just about a person disappearing from a plane. It was about whether such a jump could even be survived in the first place. So he began to rebuild the entire event step by step. He studied weather reports from that night, especially wind speed and storm conditions. He examined possible flight routes and how the aircraft would have reacted at different altitudes. He also looked closely at parachute types that were likely used and how a human body would respond to a jump in total darkness, heavy rain, and strong turbulence. He even went further, testing scenarios in simulations and carefully recreating what a descent might look like under those conditions. He asked simple but powerful questions. Could a person stay stable in the air? Could they land safely in rough terrain? Could survival even be realistic? As his work continued, something interesting began to appear. Certain details that were once treated as minor or uncertain now formed a pattern, and that pattern did not fit neatly with the earlier explanations that had been widely accepted. One name kept showing up again and again in his research notes: Richard Floyd McCoy Jr. McCoy was not a random suspect pulled from thin air. He had real skills and a real background that matched many of the known requirements for the hijacking. He was a trained Vietnam War veteran, a helicopter pilot, and someone highly experienced in parachuting under demanding conditions. In other words, he had both the knowledge and the physical ability to attempt something similar. Even more troubling was what came next. Just a few months after the famous disappearance, McCoy was linked to another hijacking that looked almost identical in method and execution. The timing shocked many researchers. That raised a difficult and unsettling question. What if the second hijacking was not simply someone copying a famous crime? What if it was the same mind repeating a pattern that had already worked once before? Who was the mastermind of the second hijacking? What was his intention? Let's delve into the details of the man who repeated the impossible. The mystery behind McCoy Cooper. In April 1972, a dramatic and carefully planned hijacking unfolded in the skies over the United States. A man named Richard McCoy boarded a United Airlines flight in Denver. To anyone watching him, he looked completely ordinary. He wore a neat suit, carried a briefcase, and behaved with quiet confidence, as if he were simply another business traveler heading to his destination. Nothing about him seemed suspicious or out of place. But once the plane was in the air, that calm appearance changed the course of the flight. McCoy handed a note to a flight attendant. The message was clear and frightening. He claimed he had a bomb. Along with this threat, he made a list of demands: $500,000 in cash, parachutes, and a refueled aircraft waiting for him after landing. He spoke with control and precision, showing no panic, only firm instructions. From that moment on, McCoy took control of the situation. He directed the crew, dictated the flight's movements, and waited patiently as everything was prepared according to his plan. There was no chaos, no unnecessary violence, just a calculated operation unfolding step by step. When the aircraft finally reached the right position over Utah, McCoy made his move. He jumped from the plane into the night, disappearing into the darkness below. Unlike the famous case of D.B. Cooper, McCoy did not vanish forever. He survived the jump, but his freedom did not last long. Within days, investigators tracked him down. Small but critical mistakes he had made during the operation eventually exposed him, leading to his capture. Yet what made the case so unsettling was not just what happened. It was how similar it was to the earlier hijacking attributed to Cooper. The same type of aircraft was used, the same method of escaping through the rear exit, the same calm and controlled behavior. Even the structure of the demands and the timing of the jump followed a nearly identical pattern. The similarities were too precise to ignore. It began to feel less like coincidence and more like repetition of a known blueprint. Official investigators eventually labeled McCoy a copycat, someone who had studied and imitated the original case. But not everyone agreed. Some observers pointed out that the differences between McCoy and Cooper, in appearance, behavior, and execution, could have been deliberate, carefully designed to confuse investigators and erase identity. From there, a more unsettling idea began to spread. What if D.B. Cooper and Richard McCoy were not two separate individuals at all? What if they were the same person, operating under different identities, refining the same daring escape plan each time? What was later uncovered about the mystery? What did family members say? Let's dive into the details of the hidden parachute, the family silence, and the unfinished truth. The parachute of suspicion uncovered. Years after the famous hijacking case, researchers who continued digging into the life of McCoy uncovered something that immediately caught their attention and raised even more questions than answers. While going through old belongings tied to his family, they discovered a parachute carefully stored away in a storage unit. At first, it seemed like an ordinary piece of equipment from a past military life. But as experts examined it more closely, they noticed something unusual. The parachute was not standard. It had been altered in ways that were not typical for civilian or even basic military use. Specialists compared its features with FBI records describing the type of parachutes requested during the infamous Cooper hijacking. What they found was striking. The materials used, the way the stitching was done, and the design of the harness all pointed toward a highly customized, military-level modification. It was not identical proof, but it was close enough to make investigators pause. It fit too many details to be ignored. When authorities later approached McCoy's family for clarification, they did not receive clear answers. There was no strong denial, no attempt to explain away the discovery. Instead, there was only silence and careful avoidance of the topic. That quiet response became part of the mystery, almost as powerful as the physical evidence itself. At the same time, McCoy's personal life made the story even harder to understand. He was described as a disciplined man, a decorated soldier, a student of religion, a husband, and a father. Yet behind that image was the possibility that he could have also carried out one of the most carefully planned airline hijackings in history, an act that required calm thinking, technical skill, and bold confidence under pressure. Years later, his children cautiously shared their thoughts. After reflecting on their father's life and the strange pieces of evidence, they suggested they believed he may have been connected to the Cooper case in a way that was never fully revealed to the public. Even so, no official confirmation has ever been made. The truth remains uncertain, leaving behind a trail of clues, doubts, and unanswered questions that continue to fuel the mystery to this day. Why has the mystery remained unraveled? What seems to be the current status with the story? Let's dig into the details of the story that refused to die. The mystery that refuses to die. Today, the mystery of D.B. Cooper still stands as one of the most puzzling and fascinating unsolved cases in modern history. Despite decades of investigation, the truth about what actually happened to him has never been confirmed. After hijacking a passenger plane in 1971, demanding ransom money, and parachuting into a stormy night, he simply vanished without a clear trace. To this day, no one knows whether he survived the dangerous jump or died shortly after landing in the harsh wilderness. Some people believe he was an extremely careful criminal who planned everything perfectly and managed to escape by luck and preparation. In this view, Cooper was not just bold, but highly intelligent, someone who studied planes, weather conditions, and escape routes well enough to outsmart an entire nation's law enforcement system. Others suggest a different possibility. They believe he may have been a trained professional, perhaps with military or aviation experience, who understood exactly how to exploit weaknesses in airline security at the time. In this theory, his disappearance was not luck at all, but skill, timing, and deep knowledge of how aircraft and parachutes worked. There is also a more intriguing idea that the answer to the mystery has never been completely hidden. Instead, it may already exist in pieces scattered across history, including strange overlaps with other cases like that of Richard McCoy, another hijacker sometimes compared to Cooper. These connections have fueled endless debates and investigations, but nothing has ever been proven beyond doubt. Yet perhaps the most disturbing part of the entire story is not the crime itself. It is the image of a man calmly sitting in seat 18C, ordinary and unnoticed, before stepping into a moment that would erase his identity forever. In a matter of seconds, he left behind a normal flight, and entered a night sky filled with danger, silence, and uncertainty. Even now, more than 50 years later, the question still lingers in the air like the storm that night. Who truly disappeared into the darkness, and what secrets are still waiting to be uncovered? So, what do you think about the mystery of D.B. Cooper? Do you think AI can really crack the case? We'd love to hear your opinions in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe.